Have a look through the papers nationally and internationally as well. Dipty's with us here on stage. I mean, Manchester really, of course, is the story which is dominating the papers right around the world, isn't it?
That's right. 22 victims, Stuart, and many of those victims were children, young boys and girls, teenagers, perhaps attending their first concert, Ariana Grande's concert in Manchester. Let's take a look at the front page of the local paper there, Manchester Evening News, which has been quite pivotal. It's been at the forefront of reporting since the attack. Prayers for the missing and the dead, it says on its front page, because indeed there are still a lot of people who are missing or unaccounted for. The paper is actually raising money now for the victims of the attack. The Belgian paper Le Soir says young people, young Westerners are the new target of the Islamic State group. While this front page from Die Welt, the German paper, is quite touching. They've added a pink balloon to the logo because pink balloons are often dropped at the end of concerts that Ariana Grande has around the world. And many of the victims were actually clutching pink balloons at the time of the attack. Die Welt says Manchester is Manchester United, and in fact that leads us on to Manchester United, the football team's match tonight. The Sun Sport says on its has re-quoted United's manager Jose Mourinho on its front page because they're playing against Ajax Amsterdam in the final of the Europa League today in Stockholm, but it's obviously been overshadowed by the events of Monday. The paper quotes him saying, "We cannot take out of our minds and hearts the victims and their families, but I know the people of Manchester will pull together as one."
It's that sense of defiance, isn't it, really, that's kind of characterising an editorial you found. This is in The Guardian.
That's right. The Guardian have penned a really, really touching editorial saying this attack hits home particularly hard for the British daily paper because the paper was founded 200 years ago in Manchester. It was known as the Manchester Guardian. They say Manchester is a special place with a capacity for innovation. It's a city that's always campaigned for what it thought was right. The challenge now is to respond to the changing shape of the threat without giving into hysteria or paranoia. Its answer, at least for The Guardian, is be Manchester, be the way you've always been, albeit with a little bit more caution now in the wake of the attacks. Now, one of the youngest victims from that attack, she was 8 years old. Her name is Safi Rose Rousas. She was tragically separated from her mother and sister in the aftermath of the attack, Stuart, and they were taken to separate hospitals, and her death was unfortunately confirmed early Tuesday morning. And this really is reflects the chaos that ensued after the blast. Parents and children were searching for each other amid the devastation, and there are even some reports that parents are refusing treatment in a bid to allow their children to be treated first.
Okay, well, the papers are also focusing as well, of course, on the upbringing of the suicide bomber himself, 22-year-old Salman Abedi.
Abedi was a regular kid who liked cricket and football, at least according to the British paper The Times. His brother actually is now being questioned by counter-terrorism authorities. Abedi has been described as a regular kid. He was going to college. He's dropped out. He'd go out drinking with his buddies. He'd go out, have fun, until about a year ago when he sort of dropped off the radar. And we see this common theme appearing: isolation, social alienation, aimlessness that really characterized other attackers, from the Paris attacks to the Brussels attacks as well. And Abedi was on the radar of British intelligence services, and people say he displayed a striking change of behavior, quite radical, quite suddenly, recently. Now, the Telegraph is looking into the connection of Abedi because he was, of course, the son of Libyan immigrants, and his neighborhood in South Manchester is home to a string of extremists and terrorists with strong Libyan connections. And the Telegraph is wondering if the South Manchester area has become a recruiting ground for jihadists. In particular, investigators want to know if Abedi was linked to another man called Abdel Rauf Abdallah, a known Libyan terrorist who also has connections or may have connections in Belgium, and perhaps to Mohammed Abrini, the famous, infamous man in the hat linked to the Paris and Brussels attacks, who had incidentally traveled to Manchester in 2015 and taken some photos of another stadium, the Old Trafford football stadium. So all these links, all speculation for the moment, but they want to see if they can tie things up.
A lot of emotional material in the papers today as well. Outpouring of support as well for Ariana Grande herself, particularly from her fans.
That's right. Really, for her, for what she represents, for the joy and happiness that she brought in her concerts. She grew up in the spotlight as a teenager. She was a Nickelodeon actress, which is sort of the holy grail for any young and upcoming performer. She successfully transformed herself into a serious artist. I quote the New York Times. They say, a modern woman who knows exactly what she wants. And the fact that the blast occurred just after her concert really is all the more symbolic, because she represented this idea of feminism, a vision of the world that's tolerant of women, of minorities, of the LGBTQ community, that advocates empowerment. She has also an quote-unquote obsessive fan base of 46 million followers on Twitter, and more than double that on Instagram. That fan base, Times says, is now rallying behind her. There was a hashtag, Ariana, this is not your fault. People saying her fandom is a family and she's part of that, and everyone lost brothers and sisters in the attack. So people really rallying behind her as well.
Nice to hear that. Thank you very much, Dipti, looking at the newspapers for us here on France 24. Thanks a lot.